Ready? We're live. Good evening, everybody. This is, camera's up there. Sorry, it's a little hard and disorienting, but we're ready to tell our story. We've thought about it a lot, and here we are. Okay. So, in light of everything that's been going on this past weekend and this week, one thing that we just keep hearing over and over again from a lot of our friends is that they don't understand what it's like to live in a Black body and be a Black person. And as much as we're for togetherness and not being divisive, we're also for being transparent and open and kind and willing to help people understand what they can't. So this is our attempt to make a little bit of a difference and help people understand what our Black life has been like.
And to be bold and use our life.
Yeah. So this takes a lot. I'm a little bit shaky right now. Be patient with us. We have written things down so that we can get it right. So if you see us reading, that's why. Okay. So let's start. This first part is called conviction, right? All right, I'll let you get started.
Okay, so I worked for a company when I was I worked for a company, for a real estate company back in, when I was a novice. The company committed fraud, and the FBI investigated a year later, and not a year later, but the company invented fraud later on, and the FBI investigated. And this is kind of emotional to me, but I'm sharing with you guys.
And I'll help them as I can.
So years later, I found myself in court next to my boss.
Yeah.
Witness couldn't tell me apart from my boss.
Because they were two African-American males.
The lead prosecutor came up to me and said the first day of court with my family there, that I was innocent. And he said if this case hadn't been passed to him, I wouldn't be in it. Yeah. And the judge is like, right. I mean, how far would you think the judge was from us?
I mean, he was in his quarters just feet away.
Yeah, my whole family heard this. And I'm like, how do you do that? The first time ever been in trouble. To me, as a Black young man, you know, when you're a kid, you're told that we won't make it to be 18. So I took pleasure in making it 18 without having a record.
Yep.
I took pleasure in making it to 21 without having a record, and that shouldn't be a goal of mine, you know. But my mom, she wanted me to operate in character and make a difference.
Yeah.
But that should be nobody's goal to make it to 18 without dying and
having a record,
or not having a record, you know.
So to reiterate, the lead prosecutor came out and shook his hand and shook his attorney's hand and said in front of me and his mother, and I believe his sister was there too, that if this case hadn't been handed down to him, Maurice wouldn't be involved at all. And then he went back to his bench and attacked him.
Yeah. Because
it was his job.
Yeah.
Also, the bailiff came to Maurice and said, what?
Well, after the case, the bailiff, the first day of court, the bailiff told me, he said that God told me he was innocent the first day. And he came to shake my hand. The bailiff said, I ain't never seen nothing like this. He said, I've seen many court cases because I sit and that's what I do. I'm the bailiff, you know. And he came to me, he said, hey, God told me to tell you to be encouraged. God told me to tell you to never give up. God told me to tell you that he has a plan for your life that's bigger than what you just went through. And please don't ever give up on God. And that meant a lot. He was with me for he sat with me for about 6 hours and just comforted me.
Yeah. So even given that, the FBI agents could actually sit on the stand and lie, bold-faced lie, and when they didn't get their story straight, the judge would stop everything and say, reread your statement so that they can get their story straight. They would use suppositions as facts and as evidence, and that's not the justice that we would think the system would use. They also, and this one hurt the most, they use Black stereotypes against my husband to sway the jury. They painted him to be a thug, and anyone who knows Maurice knows that he is far from a thug. And it was just horrible how they used that stereotype and weaponized it against him because of the color of his skin. Out of 12 people, why don't you go ahead and say that?
Yeah, out of 12 people, one of the juries was Black. We wanted more Black juries. We wanted like regular, everyday people. Majority of the juries were highly educated. And the only Black juror we had, like she was the vice president of a corporate company that if I told you the name, you would know. So we didn't have regular people. They were all thrown out.
Yeah, they were all white collar. It wasn't a jury of their peers. So no one there could relate to either of the people who were standing on trial. And that's just not justice as we believe it should be served. I mean, to throw out every single person of color except for one, and the one that's there is not relatable, can't understand what it's like to be a blue collar worker at all, was just, it was beyond belief.
Yeah. So the jury was highly educated.
Your last one.
You know, I'm innocent. I got convicted of a crime. I didn't commit. That hurts. It hurt me. It hurt my family. I served time while the companies committed fraud, while other companies committed fraud knowingly, and they get fined. You have companies that's I have the news articles that made billions, and they only fined them
and take advantage of people
and never went to prison,
and they never serve prison time, and or even worse, sometimes they get away with it altogether.
And I don't understand how that's fair, or fair at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have billions. You didn't find me, and and I didn't even know. But how can another company do exactly what you're saying we did, that my company did, and then you just find them and they get off? I don't understand that.
And so it's really hard as someone who's innocent to go through. It's really traumatizing, and knowing that there's pretty much nothing you can do as a Black person to defend yourself. So let's talk about the next topic, which is housing disparities and how that's affected our family personally. So we used to live in South Tampa. It was a small apartment complex, and everything was fine until some investors from New York bought it while we lived there. And once they bought it and these new owners took over, they let the whole place fall apart. I mean, they seriously did not care. Now, all of our neighbors were Black like us, or brown, or poor whites. So you can imagine they had no, other than doing the right thing, they had no, they felt they had no reason to take care of the apartments.
I mean, they had no voice at all.
And the people had no voice. Yeah. So it turned into the slums. We could get nothing repaired. Sewage was coming through the drains. It actually gave my husband and the kids pink eye just from trying to wash their hands and brush their teeth in the kitchen, in the sink. Mold was growing rampant. The roof fell in on our neighbor's child's head.
Yeah.
Rats infested some of the units, and there was no working air conditioning, which, if you're in the South, if you're in Florida, you understand that that's a huge problem. We even told our landlord, the owner specifically, that our son suffers from febrile seizures and he cannot be too hot.
He could care less.
Otherwise, he'd seize and sometimes stop breathing. And this man actually told us that he did not care.
Yeah.
Our neighbors had it far worse. They had flooding. Mold. It was horrible.
Water running in their house with black mold.
And they had kids. So when we contacted code enforcement after trying so hard to contact people around us and being told by lawyers that there was nothing we could do, that the law was on the landlord's side, and the landlord was in New York, it was out of sight, out of mind. He really didn't care, and he voiced to us that he didn't care. We found ourselves calling code enforcement, and we weren't protected, but some of our neighbors were, because their leases had been extended, and they were paying an egregious amount for these loans. They upped the rent regardless of not doing anything to fix any of their problems. Besides that, Maurice was on probation, and his probation officer at the time told him that we couldn't move. So even though it was a health risk to our kids, to ourselves, and to specifically our son, we were told that we didn't have the right to move. Once we were able to move, because Maurice got a new probation officer, and she said we could.
Well, she said we should never have been told to not be able to move.
Right.
And
so,
but that was like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, but it doesn't change the fact that the first probation officer had the opportunity to do the right thing and didn't care.
Yeah.
So after that probation officer told us that we could move, we did, or we attempted to. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And that same landlord attacked my credit after we left. As Black people, we have the right to safe and affordable housing. And I need people to understand that. There are many Black people who appear to be just fine, who are not. And that is why we're fighting for what we're fighting for. We're fighting for equal rights when it comes to housing, equal rights when it comes to the law and trials and justice. So please understand why this is so emotional. Housing disparities, part 2. Okay, so talk about how we did that, please.
So we found a house that we were going to rent. We went through all the paperwork and everything. The lady told us we was approved. She said, "Hey, you guys can move in tomorrow." So
we have to put in a deposit.
Yeah, and we put the deposit up, did everything they asked us, and she told us we were approved.
And we checked in with her beforehand. We did all the right things. If you know me, I'm very organized about my dates and when I call people and everything was in order as it should have been.
So we get ready to move, the day to move, and she literally calls us and say, "Hey, you guys don't qualify."
And that they won't rent to us, and that they are keeping our deposit.
Yeah.
So now we had nowhere to go, and people were turning Maurice away because he had a record.
Yes. So we went to other apartment complexes, and they was like, "Hey, you're a felon. You shouldn't even fill out this form, or you're gonna lose your deposit, and don't even fill out a form here." And that's what we were advised.
And you have to know, we aren't a danger to anyone. We just wanted a safe place to raise our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So after they took our deposit, we didn't have enough money to even make a deposit on other places if they were to accept us, and no one was accepting us. So we had to stay in hotels, and we were moving almost every single morning back into our car.
Yeah, or to a cheaper hotel, whichever saved us money. Which
was how it was for us for 2 straight months. And no one would have known. Only the closest to us knew about it. I was actually working at a private school at the time, and we're running our charity through all of this. Mm-hmm. We were literally without a steady place to lay our head down at night. And we were still helping families because that's what God put on our hearts to do.
Yeah.
Even though we were in so much pain, I continued to help students, and we continued to help families.
Yeah. And really, some of the families was in worse positions than we were. So, I mean, you just count your blessings and you just keep moving. I mean, some of the families was hurting, and they had situations that was, that you wouldn't even thought that a family would go through, even that was worse than ours.
So then our good friend, who was not relation to us by blood, but she's family nonetheless.
Yes.
She opened her doors to us, and she let us stay with her for a month at no cost. She was white, and I want you to know that. And it was a large and very sweet gesture that we will never forget.
Yeah. Okay. So this helped us save up enough money and to get into our next rental.
So that was now 3 months that never had to happen. And you have to know that other Black families go through this. It is not uncommon.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about part 3, job loss.
So I lost my job with Uber.
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry, we skipped one. Here we go. We're going to do this one first because it makes more sense chronologically. Okay. See, remember when I told you I'm really organized? This is part of it. Okay. So the next part, part 3 is police trauma. Well, there was an incident with Dylan, our youngest son, where Dylan was hurt and Maurice had to take him to the hospital. He rode with him in the ambulance, and when I found out that where they were headed, I got a ride and I met them at the hospital. When we got there, we were really worried about Dylan and whether or not he was going to be okay. Meanwhile, while we were worried, while the doctors were trying to work on him, while the nurses were helping with him, the police were called. And when they came, because they came very quickly, they didn't wait until the doctors had finished looking at Dylan or had told us anything about his condition or even if he was going to be okay. They immediately started questioning us, which has got to be one of the most heartless things I've ever experienced. And I apologize.
They were shooting Dylan with needles, and I mean, he wasn't.
They were taking his blood. Yeah. They were,
we're trying to really find out if he's okay, and they're asking us all these questions, and
So, sorry again. We're reading because it is such a hard thing to get through, and we want to make sure that we don't miss anything important. So they started questioning us, and we still don't know what's going on with our son. Now, we were cooperative. We have no reason not to be. And we were answering their questions even as the tone shifted and they became accusatory. Then my husband said, maybe I should call my lawyer. I don't think I want to answer any more questions until I speak to him, which is a right that he has.
Well, I gave them a verbal explanation of what happened. And they said that wasn't good enough. We want you to put it in writing. And my lawyer, from my first incident that I was in, he told me don't ever get him anything in writing. And I learned from the first time because I met with the FBI agent and I answered all the questions. And I didn't know any better. Yeah. I had never been in trouble. So my lawyer said from here out, if you're ever pulled over by the police or anything, give me a call.
Yeah.
And that's all I was doing what I have a right to do.
And once he said that he wanted to speak with his attorney, the moment that escaped his mouth, I saw a change from the police officer who was standing closest to him. He immediately became aggressive. He handcuffed him. He became forceful. He became violent. He put the handcuffs on too tight. He started pushing my husband right in the doorway of this hospital room where my little boy could see.
Yeah, he was shaking. Like Dylan was hurt. He arrested his father right in front of him. So they take me in. They get me between where my wife could see me, where nobody could see me going through this hall, and they start roughing me up.
And they never even read him his Miranda rights.
They never read me my rights, so they start roughing me up. I'm 6'4". At the time I was 245, 6'4", and the guy's pushing me, he's shoving me, he's roughing me up. And I'm like, listen, I say, man, this is why y'all get a bad rep. as police officers, what you're doing right now. So he said, oh, you want to play the race card? And he just shoved me some more. And he just went on and on. So I said, listen, I can follow every direction that you're giving me. I said, I'm pretty sure you look me up in the system. I'm pretty sure you know that I have a felony. I'm pretty sure, like, if you look at my record, even in prison, doing 3.5 years of prison, I had no incidents.
Not one.
Not one. Not even in a halfway house. So I am not a threat to you. And you know, then they stop. And I'll go with you willingly. And they finally stop hitting me and pushing me. So we get to the police.
But you shouldn't have to claim to them that you're a good person. You shouldn't have to, at that time, make a claim that you're a good person. There should be no force having to be used unless they actually have to use force to protect themselves. It makes no sense why someone in their custody going with them willingly, they will hit and push and shove and say horrible, verbally abusive things to in front of his wife and child, in a hospital, before we know that our son is okay. I can't imagine what he went through. All I can tell you is what I went through. And I'd never want anyone to live through that. So later, I'm still in the hospital with my son, not knowing what's going on. And the officer comes upstairs, he's a white officer, and he says, I know your husband is a good man. I've been talking to him. And I respect him. And I took his apology to heart, but I couldn't get over the pain that he said this after he treated him so violently in front of me. It was very strange to see this officer in two different lights. That he's like, I'm a Christian, your husband's a Christian. We connected like that over that. But yet when he just simply asked to speak to his attorney, which he has every right to ask for, you treated him like no Christian should ever treat another Christian. So yes, I am calling out the behavior of those police officers because that was not called for. They were so emotional about putting this Black man in his place that they didn't even read him his Miranda rights. And that is not okay. I understand that we technically got away scot-free in that he wasn't physically harmed. But you have to know that any amount of harassment, any amount of violence, even verbal, from the police is unwarranted, and it should not happen. They're in a place of authority, and they should be serving and protecting, and that's what we expect of our police officers.
And I really think, like, even police in uniform, like, they shouldn't be able to cuss at people. I just think in that uniform, it should be the utmost character in that uniform because of what you represent, because you can cuss at a person, they can take, you cussing at a person can take something to another level. And I think that's something we can correct. Like, they shouldn't be able to cuss at people at all as an officer in that uniform, any officer.
Well, and tell them about when you were growing up and your experiences with police.
Well, when I was growing up, one time me and my brothers, we were coming back from the movies, and we were driving to my cousin's house to drop him off. And the police officers came. They pulled us over. It was two officers first. It was a lady and a gentleman. And so the lady, she pulls us over. I'm driving. She gets me out of the car. She puts her gun to my head. She said, "There's drugs in the car." She gets all my brother, my cousin out. We're right up the street from this house. And, you know, she basically puts the gun to my head and she said, "There's drugs in the car." And they go searching the whole car and they find no drugs, you know. And if it hadn't been for my auntie coming up the road, because the people saw her son, and they went and got my auntie, and my auntie was coming up the road. When my auntie came, then the cops, all of them kind of calmed down and they let us go, you know. And so as a teenager, that wasn't the only time that we experienced that. You know, we experienced that all the time in our neighborhood.
But I always wonder what would have happened if your aunt didn't come that day. Like, would you all have been more, I mean, just to have a gun to your head, would you have been another face on the wall of kids to not forget?
I mean, I was 16, you know.
You're a kid. You're a kid. And more than that, you were an innocent child who did not commit a crime. There's no way you should be treated like that. So we went through the situation with Dylan at the hospital. And with that arrest, and with that came job loss, which is number 4, what we're going to talk about.
So I lost my job with Uber once they found out. I was working with Uber at the time, and they found out that they tried to get me a charge that took a year to go into court concerning this charge, with DCF investigated and find out no evidence of neglect or abuse.
So just to be frank, within 2 months, DCF had completed their entire investigation and decided there was no evidence of abuse or neglect. And the investigator was really nice, and she told us that we were great parents and we did everything that we could have and that we did the right thing. So tell me why it took another 10 months.
And they drug it in court. They drug the case in court.
Before we got to see an end to this situation. So the prosecutor relentlessly continued to pursue Maurice, and we asked his attorney, like, why?
Well, we didn't ask my attorney. My attorney called us at 11 o'clock at night, and he basically told us the only reason she pursued this case is because you had a felon, and it was a slam dunk.
Yeah.
And that was his words, not ours.
We also know what that translates to. You're being treated this way because you're Black. And we didn't want to make it into a race thing. In fact, when we told our friends about it and our family, we did not point to the race card as a reason. It was our white friends who said that never would have happened to you if you were white. Mm-hmm. They could not believe it, and they were more angry than we were. So because he has a record, 1 strike. Because he's a Black man, 2 strikes. They felt like they could pursue him and really ruin his life, even though there was no evidence to do that, to suggest that that was justified. So the charges were eventually dropped a year later, but the damages had already been done. Our family suffered tremendously, emotionally and financially, because our main source of income was gone.
Uber never called me or investigated to see what if the charges was legitimate. I mean, it's just a loss of funds, loss of job, and that was a big loss because every day I made a lot of money driving Uber.
And even through that, we never stopped helping people. We were continuing to do the charity. We were continuing to put our money towards people who needed diapers and clothes because we believe in helping people and doing good even when wrong is being done to you.
And servicing over 300 families a month.
Yeah.
And not looking back, not complaining, not, just pushing forward.
Just pushing
forward. That's all we could do. Even with at the same time of me being on probation through all this, and my probation officer, I would go meet my probation officer. And, she was like, how do you, if you lose this case, you're going back.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't have time to think about that. I got kids at home. I got a wife. And she would ask me, how do I feel about that? Like, what do you mean how I feel? You know how I feel.
Or her saying,
I shouldn't even have to express that to you.
Right. Or her saying that, he ought to feel ashamed of himself for the first conviction. And we're like, for what? Because he didn't do anything. It was really horrible to be told how you need to feel and what you need to do. And they were just abusive. I mean, I got pregnant right after Maurice came home, and the people at the halfway house told him that when he tried to get permission to go to my baby appointments, my doctor's appointments, they told him, why would you even want to go to that? Because that's not your child.
Yeah.
And when the probation officer came to inspect my home, which they have to do before he comes home, she said, is your safety going to be in jeopardy? And I was like, what are you talking about? Because she could see that I was pregnant, and she wanted to know if my husband would have a problem with me being pregnant, and just assuming that this child was not his.
And we're married. It's like, come on, like, are you serious?
As if it was any of their business anyway.
Yeah.
It was really just horrible to be under their microscope of judgment and stereotypes 24/7.
And for punishment, they put a leg monitor on me, and I came from a camp, never got in trouble, never was supposed to have a leg monitor, and they just made it difficult and hard.
They would make him wake up at 4 a.m. to ride his bike from South Tampa to Hillsborough, which is a long time if you're driving, just so that he could show up to show that, I guess.
To take a drug test.
I don't know what it was. It was really ridiculous. They do egregious things to dehumanize you. And it's because they can. So let's talk about medically, number 5. So hospital births, for me, my first 2 were hospital births, where were situations where my wishes and my voice really meant nothing. Both times I was violated by having my water broken. And to this day, if I were to tell a physician about this, or in the past, I've told physicians about this experience, and they said, "Are you sure that they broke your water? Are you sure it wasn't on accident?" And both times I saw the tool used and felt the tug of them breaking my waters. Now, normally that wouldn't seem like a big deal, but the fact that I was lied to and said that they were just checking me or whatever excuse they came up with to lie to me, is hard. And I'll tell you why it's hard. It's because I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. And when a medical staff person violates you physically without your consent, it makes the entire birth experience traumatic. And it's really hard to trust people in medicine after that.
And I had to calm you down both of the times that it happened, and that wasn't fun.
He saw the look on my face, and he took my hand and he laid me back down because I felt like getting up and running in the middle of labor because I was so violated. And so for my next 2 births, I decided to do some research and take control of my own situation. And so I went to a birth center. And this is the first time in my entire life when my concerns were heard and respected by a member of the medical community. I wasn't talked down to or tried to be dissuaded from my opinions or my choices. I was treated as a person should be treated and not as a second-class citizen like I had been treated before. I think sometimes we get so used to it that we forget that it's abuse. So when we were referred to the hospital during Amber's pregnancy, because I had fibroids, and they have to check to make sure basically that the fibroids aren't so close to the openings that it could impede your ability to give birth naturally. So when we got there, we were examined, and the physician knew that we were planning on having an out-of-hospital birth.
And we were certified birthing instructors. So.
And at that time, we were certified birthing instructors. And she decided that she was going to bully us. This physician, with all of her experience, decided that she was going to bully us. She basically called me stupid for not having a hospital birth. She told us that we could be killing our baby, and if that happened, it was on us. If I were a first-time mom, that would have been enough to scare me. That would have been enough to scare me back into an experience that I did not want, back into trauma that I did not need. And I probably would have ended up with a C-section because of all of the stress that being in that environment caused me. It is not okay to bully your patients. It is not okay to demean them and say that their experiences are not valid. And yet Black women and Black men go through this regularly. It is scientifically, it is taught in the medical world that Black people feel less pain than white people. If that is still in medical textbooks, what do you think is being trained? This is not okay, and this is one of the reasons that Black people, we need justice, we need equality, even medically. Now we're going to talk about some career disparities, and this is not an exhaustive list. This is just the most prolific things that we could think of really since this morning. So I'm going to open, and then I'm going to let my husband talk about it. So as a Black person, you can be qualified for a job and you can have the experience needed for the job, and yet you can be told that you won't get the job because you don't have the correct degree. I'm going to say that again. You can be qualified. You can have enough experience. You can in every way be capable of excelling at a job.
And they can know that you're capable
and
too.
They can know that you're capable
you.
Too.
Yeah.
And they will say, we cannot hire you into this position for whatever reason, whatever rules are barring, because of lack of a degree. And let me tell you why that is really problematic for Black and brown people. This disproportionately affects Black people because white adults earn college degrees at higher rates than Black adults. Also, college-educated Black adults are more likely to be unemployed than any other ethnic group with college degrees. So see, we've been told, go to school and get your education, and you can still end up unemployed at higher rates than any other groups. They don't factor in all of the systemic nonsense that keeps our Black people from being able to attend college and finish college once they're there and be successful afterwards. So when you put rules on positions like you need a degree to fulfill this position, and everybody at that company knows you do not need a degree to be successful in that position, you are essentially saying this position is for some people and not for all people. And let me tell you why that's wrong.
Or having a pathway for people who don't have a degree to get a degree. And if you don't have that pathway, then what are you saying?
You're saying a lot. You're saying we don't want your kind in any kind of position of superiority, of manager's positions, anything like that. So my husband, he's qualified for a job, but he has to remain in a part-time position, earning 50% less per hour and with fewer hours. So he's making less money because it's part-time and there's fewer hours. He's also making less money.
No, it's the same amount of hours.
It's not the same amount of hours because one is a full-time position.
Listen, I do the same. I do the same job of the person that did it full time now. Mm-hmm. I just make half of the amount of money that he made, a little bit over half.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into what that means. When you're full time, that means that you got to get medical benefits, so when you are being pigeonholed as part time, receiving 50% pay an hour, doing a lot of the same tasks, then that leaves your family uninsured. It leaves your family scrambling to try and afford medical insurance. And we all know that that is impossibly hard to do on your own. Spoiler alert, we cannot afford medical insurance for our family. It's a trickle-down effect, and it's not hard to see once you start breaking it down. Not to mention childcare, because when he's working at 50% pay than someone else who's doing that same job, we can't afford childcare. We can't. So it doesn't even make sense to do it. It's like a sacrifice to go to work.
And actually, I'm a stay-at-home dad right now because if we pay for childcare, it would be
outrageous.
Yeah, outrageous.
All right, so let's talk about how racism affects Black families, Black lives as consumers. And this is just, again, one example of many, but it is one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. Can you open?
Can't see
it. Sorry, it's light.
Okay, so we bought a car from Ford Auto. I can't even see that.
Okay. And sorry, I wrote in a light color. From day one, there were problems with this car.
Yes.
From day one.
So we reported the concerns to the dealer about the car was built and Ford knew it had a bad transmission. And so we bought a brand new car from Ford, and the car had a bad transmission, and Ford knew that.
And other problems because it went further than the transmission.
Yes, and it was shudder, like the car would shut down. And actually, let me see, and the dealer. Okay, and we was told it was when we first bought the car, we was told that because the car it would shake a lot. So we were told that the car was normal, that was the normal way that the car would shake and everything. And that it would get better as we drove. What they were telling us that the car would learn our driving habits.
Yeah. And just to ignore it, and it would get better. And we knew in our hearts that this was crazy. But honestly, we're so used to being told that what we experience is invalid that we start to tell ourselves, it's really gaslighting. That's like the definition of gaslighting, is being told, no, you're crazy. That'll go away. You didn't experience that. That's not what happened.
And so this is a brand new car that shakes.
Horribly. So the problems persist and almost cause me to lose my job because I don't have actual reliable transportation. Now understand, I bought a brand new car. What possibly could go? I mean, why would this car be unreliable? It does not make any sense. So the car shudders and it shuts off in traffic. It left us stranded multiple times, very small children. We have little kids in the heat, in seriously dangerous situations. Once the car cut off while I was on the interstate in front of a semi.
Yes. I
was so shook up that I just basically called Ford in tears. And they told me there was nothing that they could do.
And the one guy said he didn't believe that. And that's
we're getting to that part. So Ford continues to fix the issue by taking it in to their service department. But then we have to fight them on everything. We have to fight them about giving us rental cars so we can continue to work and take our kids to school. Because we don't have the luxury of having two cars. And now I remember this now. They would make us pay random fees for problems that should not exist in a brand new car. We were told by the service manager that we were lying about what was happening with the car and that the car would never cut off like it did to us all the time. We had to record it for him to even possibly listen to us.
Well, he wouldn't listen even after
He wouldn't listen after that either. He then decides to tell us how stupid it was for us to continue to drive a car that was dangerous for our kids. Why didn't we just drive another car? And we had to inform him, we don't have the money for a second car.
We bought a brand new car that was supposed to work.
How ignorant of him to believe that everyone can afford a second vehicle. That was the one vehicle that we expected to do right. That's why we bought it brand new. So not only did he say that to our faces.
Well, a car that we paid $25,000, what was it,
25,000.
It was only worth $6,000 because the bad transmission that Ford put in.
Yeah, so the car is only worth $6,000. So we're completely upside down in this car. He calls his superiors on us and tells them that we are loud and angry and lying and like spreading lies. I go on Twitter because no one else in Ford is listening. I have talked to every single department. I've even called corporate. I have done the most. I go on Twitter and I start raising heck on Twitter and I get to someone and then they tell me to call corporate. It was just horrible. And I wish I could say that's where the story ends. But after corporate ignores our calls and our complaints, basically someone says, well, you might want to join the class action lawsuit. Meanwhile, while this car is shutting off and it is unsafe to drive, they're saying that we have to pay them over $400 a month on this dangerous vehicle. Now, given all the things that I've told you up to this point, how easy do you think it is to pay $400 on a vehicle that is not even reliable? And by the way, now we're paying premium gas prices on it. Instead of unleaded like we're supposed to, we're paying premium just so that it will stop shaking so much.
Well, that's what we were told, that you need to buy the high gas so it can stop shaking, and that wasn't true.
So after struggling to make these over $400 a month payment on this really horrible, shoddy car and waiting to hear anything on the lawsuit, honestly, we're just trying to outlast the lawsuit at this point. They repossessed the car because of our financial situation. We're not able to work with them. They actually say that their billing department and the people who deal with the lawsuit, people that deal with the manufacturing of the car, are two completely different parts of the company, and there is nothing that can be done. So there's this class action lawsuit that's filed against Ford that we're a part of for this car, specifically some of the problems we're dealing with. And by the way, that manager said, people have been having problems, but they're not as bad as the problems you're having, or you seem to be having, is what he said.
And nobody else is having this
us.
problem. Yeah.
Even though we brought him in video footage of this car.
Yeah, he would tell us over and over again, it's not stopping that many times. And we would just videotape.
It shut off 20 times in like 10 minutes. It was horrible. So even all of that still, and the problems, the being told that we were wrong, the being told that we're liars, the being told that we are unsafe, and really he was calling us bad parents for putting our kids in that car, our only vehicle.
It would take us 3 hours just to get home because it shuts down that much. And we're on the side of the road,
waiting for it to cool down, waiting for it to start up again. Is that even after all of that, we have to pay them $16,000 back. And even then, they're going to impact my credit. This is what it's like to be a Black consumer. I likely, even though I'm in the lawsuit, I don't think I'm going to be compensated for the years of trouble, the years of pain, the danger that they put us in, the abuse that we went through at the hands of this dealership and its employees. I won't see any justice for that. I'm just in a lot of debt. And it'll prevent me from doing things like leaving my kids well. It'll prevent me doing things like buying a home. I tell you these things not so you can feel bad for us, but so that you can understand what it is like to be Black in America. Which brings me to our hopes and goals. I want to buy a house. And the things that I explained to you before and other conditions make that so difficult, almost impossible to attain. We have to constantly fight to keep our kids in good schools and continuously push against a system that wants to swallow us up whole. There is no such thing as generational wealth in the Black community. If you find it, it is rare. And that is not by accident. We can't even take our kids to get ice cream without racism knocking us and smacking us dead in the face. You want to learn more about that? Just ask me. I've got receipts. My kids, having to explain to my kids what racism is not fair. Because I know they can't escape it. Not yet. And as a store manager, fresh out of college at Abercrombie & Fitch, I was forced to follow a Black teenager around the store I was truly afraid that I was going to lose my job and afraid of being evicted. So I had 2 kids to take care of. Their dad couldn't be around. I couldn't lean on him and his job because he was locked up. So I didn't say no after the first time they made me do it. But it was so horrible. It was so horrible that I refused to do that to any child or adult, any person of color ever again. I didn't want anyone to be subjected to the same kind of treatment that I get and my family gets when we walk into the mall. I didn't want him to be suspected because we're Black. And the worst part was, being a manager, I had the numbers on that store. We knew the people who were stealing from us. And spoiler alert, those people were white. So we were being told to follow around people's children who just looked like they didn't belong. And those kids never did anything. The whole time I was there, I never had a single Black person steal from that store. It's wrong. And it needs to end. Yeah, no, I'm gonna get through it because it needs to be said. Let's talk about lessons that we have to teach our children. The other day, I saw a post on social media, and in the comments, I saw a white man say that he fears for his child's life with all of the rioting and anger that's out in the world right now, and that wasn't right. And I told him, he's right. It is not right. You should never have to fear for your child's safety. And I said, do you know what else is not right? It's not right that I have to teach my children, the ones old enough to understand. Let me tell you how old they are. They're 4, they're 8, and they're 11. And since they're about 3 or 4, I've had to teach them how not to appear threatening to white people. I have to teach them to not touch things in stores and not to walk out of the doors of the stores with items, because it's not just about stealing for us. It's about getting the police called on you and maybe losing your life or your freedom. If you don't believe me, Google the man whose daughter took a doll from the dollar store and had to witness her pregnant mom be harassed and her dad being held at gunpoint and tripped on the pavement, hot Arizona pavement, and harassed by police officers. If you don't believe that that is serious, that is wrong to have to teach my kids, just go Google it. I'm getting through this. We have to teach our kids how to behave above reproach and be perfect so people will not call the police on you. We have to teach them how not to be threatening. When we go places, people compliment us on our kids. They compliment us on their behaviors and we say thank you. But they have no idea that that is not just so they can be good kids, but so that they get to be kids for a little while longer. It's a survival tactic. I have to teach my kids that we don't get the privilege to be angry in public. We don't. I can't look. There's no exception to that. When you are Black, you don't get the privilege to be angry in public. Not freely anyway. You will most likely get threatened with the call of the police. Just ask Christian. Just ask Christian, who got the police called on him while he was in Central Park bird watching. You don't get that chance. You don't get that opportunity. It's not okay. And we have to teach that to our kids. We have to teach our children how to conduct themselves around police, how to be respectful and even-toned and keep their hands in sight, not to reach for anything suddenly or make sudden movements, not to break eye contact and to yes, sir, yes, ma'am, at all times. We have to teach them to learn and memorize the name of the police officer, try to get a badge number, and most importantly, above all else, come home safe. That's the priority. And still, through all of that, we teach our kids to respect the badge. We teach them to say, thank you for your service, and to walk up to a police officer and to thank them for the dangers that they put themselves in. There is nothing in our history that indicates we should do that. But we do that because we're Christian and we show love. And we want them to respect police officers. But more importantly, we want that to go both ways. And that's why our Black lives matter. And you have to know that we're not doing this for popularity. We are not making this video to go viral. We're making this video so that anyone who sees this might be able to see through the nonsense, to see through the noise and see that we are people, and we are people trying to inspire change. Hopefully you can see why people are angry and see why, as a friend, as a coworker, as family, whoever you are, you have to speak up, because this kind of violence, this kind of treatment is unacceptable.
And everybody can't handle that kind of treatment. Everybody's not going to respond right to that kind of treatment. Like sometimes they're going to respond wrong, but the thing is, we got to get out of this kind of treatment. We got to treat everybody right. Like Black Lives Matter, and you got to treat Black people right. That's important. And if you treat them right, then you won't have these expressions that you don't like. If you just treat them right, everybody's not going to be loving. Everybody's not going to be kind. You know, some people are they're going to come out in hate. They're going to come out in rage, you know. But one thing we know that, like, where do we go from here? You
have to know whether you are part of the group that gets the privilege or part of the group that is oppressed. We have to persist nonetheless. We have to insist that rights are just that. They're rights and not privileges. And they are for everyone. And so when someone says to you, all lives matter, say all lives should matter. But right now, they don't. They don't matter yet. And that's been my blanket statement. When someone tells me all lives matter, I say all lives should matter, but they don't yet. Now, part of persisting is prayer and understanding and having the patience to speak with people around you that have different views. But more importantly, having the heart to listen and then pray again. And that's where we stand.
And also leaving the bitterness behind. Like I could be very bitter right now. I mean, I can be bitter for a lot of reasons. I can be mad and offended for a lot of reasons. Never respect police officers for a lot of reasons. But for me to, if I put that poison into my kids to not treat them right and
then
to
we
not,
failed.
man, and I fail my
Then we
kids, and I
failed.
can't. That's not the message I got to say to my kids. And every day I'm talking to my kids about their conduct, how they conduct themselves, not just talent but character. And I go back to what Dr. King said. You know, Dr. King said with his daughter, he said that know her not by the color of skin, but by the content of her character. And character is the solution for my family. I can't say what the solution is for your family, but where do I go from here as we go from this point, like shining in character? I got to.
And love. I know it sounds very simple, but it is just that simple.
I mean, what I'm going to tell my kids, character and love. That's the message, character and love. Listen, every day you got to operate in character. Every day for all of us is a character developing day. I can't just go out in public and act any kind of way. Even our celebrities, they can't just go out in public and act any kind of way. If they don't have character, they lose their position. I don't care how talented they are. They make mistakes out of character, you get removed. But character is the solution. If we have character, we're going to have longevity. If you have character, you're not going to treat a person wrong. You know, and we need character today on all sides, on every side is character development for everybody. If a person has character, he don't need accountability. That means he's going to always do right because nobody but God is watching him. And he believes that. And he's going to make the right decisions and he's going to treat everybody the same.
Yeah. So when people around you don't display character, you should say something. I completely stand by that. Say something. Don't be so afraid of being uncomfortable, discomfort and uncomfortable at the same time. Don't be so afraid of being uncomfortable that you don't stand up for the right thing. Now, if this touched you in some way today, please do share this, not to promote us, but to promote the message. Because so many people are out there who haven't heard the right rhetoric yet. And we hope that this helps some of you. And love to everyone out there. Please stay safe.
And I also want to share with you, you know, we run a local charity in Tampa, Florida. We service over 300 families a month. And the reason we started our charity, you know, one day me and my wife was at IHOP and we were just talking. And we were talking at IHOP. And she told me, you know, we were talking about problems that our family had. And as we began to talk, you know, I was thinking like, why we keep talking about problems that our family has, that the community has. And I was like, listen, let's stop talking and let's make a difference. And that day we decided to make a difference.
Yeah.
So we started a charity and we prayed and we started. We got our charity status in 7 days. It's called Joining Together, Eliminating Poverty. And that's what we believe in. We believe in coming together in our community and making a difference. Not waiting on the government, not waiting on somebody else. No, be the change. And we started out to make a change first in our own family, then in other families. And that's what we believe in our charity, that is family first. And then we're going to reach out to other families. And in 4 years, we started servicing over 300 families a month. And it impacted a lot of lives. It's still impacting lives. Now, where we are now, a year ago, we changed our approach from us servicing 300 families a month, over 300 families a month, to 1,000 people making a difference in their local community to empower somebody else, to you impacting 300 families a month. And that's what we're setting out to do. And that's what we're going to do from this. We're going to keep doing what we've done. We're going to keep doing what we've been doing. Is strengthening families, and every family need to be strengthened. We're marching in all 50 states to change the epidemic of 24 million fatherless children in America. Yeah. And that's serious. Can you talk on that?
Well, I just think it's important to stand for something. And we understand that there are a lot of problems in the world, and there are even more people. As many problems in the world, there are more people. And we can all move in our own space and be great at that, and just never be afraid to speak up, never be afraid to make a difference, never be afraid to be that first voice.
And you're the best person in your community because you see it firsthand. You know the needs for your community. If you're there, you see it. It's just like when we were at the when we were at the place in South Temple that we live, and other people didn't talk, they didn't speak up for themselves. So we spoke up for them, and we called code enforcement, and we got together with the community. It's the same thing. It's us helping one another and stepping up, and that individual stepping up to make a difference. You have a voice. You need to run for office. We need to learn how to lobby. We need to go forth and make a difference and learn what we need to do. Yeah, we need to vote. I mean, we need to be active. You need to be active in your own, not just stopping at voting, but on your watch in your community, make the difference. Like, you be the change. Don't wait on the government. Don't wait on your neighbor. No, you wake up tomorrow, you pray and ask God, how can I make a difference? And you go forth in all confidence and courage and make the difference. Believe in you. Like, you're the change, and we believe that you can do it, and we can do it together. We're only as strong as the weakest link. So, let's do something positive and let's make a difference. And we can come together and we can do that.
Yes. So we want to thank you again for being with us. If you've lasted this long, we really appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead and leave your comments. The discussion doesn't end here. It can continue in the comments. And be thinking about what you can do to be the change, because it doesn't stop with us. It doesn't even begin with us. So thank you again. Please share. We love you all. Have a great night.